This is the Make the Money and Run podcast for Thursday, December 2nd, 2021, sponsored by the Britannia Arms of Cupertino and the Britannia Arms of Capitola. Check out both locations, one in Silicon Valley, one on the shores of the Pacific Ocean in Santa Cruz County, right in Capitola Village. We welcome you into studio. Vasivada Party Solo here for a few minutes. Charlie O will join us in a little bit. You can join us every Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. 3 o'clock Eastern. Last Monday, we did not have a show, but today and tomorrow we'll be here 1 o'clock Eastern for the Friday football show tomorrow. We got a big weekend of college football, big weekend of the NFL as we hit week 13 of the National Football League. How about free agency in baseball? We have a lockout, by the way, as of midnight last night. The Major League Baseball owners have locked out the Players Association, but that didn't stop them from signing about $1 billion worth of free agents, or probably even more than $1 billion of free agents. So we have that as well, too. Don't forget, every day during the week by 6 Eastern, we have our social media selections. Intern Nick, Charlie O, and myself will get to the latest news and the latest selections by 6 o'clock Eastern for mostly the night games. We'll have some college basketball in the next few weeks that start early in the morning on the West Coast and early in the afternoon on the East Coast. But that's how we do it. We talk about sports. We talk about sports wagering. We talk about the angles of it. And we make sure you have all the information. So Charlie O will join us in a second. As I said, the Britannia Arms of Capitola on the shores of the Pacific Ocean, located on the end of the Capitola Village. Facebook.com/Britannia Arms Capitola, 831-464-2583. And then if you're in Silicon Valley, the Britannia Arms of Cupertino, the longest running British pub and restaurant located in Silicon Valley on the border of San Jose and Cupertino. Check them out. BritanniaArmsDeanza.com, 408-252-7262 every Sunday. The NFL Sunday Ticket is there. Lots to do. 20 TVs in Cupertino, 7 TVs in Capitola. But the Sunday Ticket, and you have the shores of the Pacific Ocean right there to look at. If your games aren't going well, if your fantasy football is not going well, if your team's not going well, then you can always walk outside and take a good view of the beach. And the way the weather's been here in California, I'm sure some of you follow me on the Instagram posts have seen, we've had unbelievable weather here in California, especially for December 2nd. So perfect day the other day. I'm looking forward to getting back down there, visiting Andy and Sydney, the owners of the Capitola branch, and then Tommy and Mike over in Cupertino. They do a great job as well for your company outings as well as private events. All right, we move into the NFL. We'll get to college football in a little bit. Obviously, big college football weekend. We start tonight. The Dallas Cowboys, a 6-point favorite, 46.5 at New Orleans. Taysom Hill is going to get the start for the Saints. Trevor Siemian experiment over for Sean Payton. Taysom Hill to get the start. A lot more packages. Alvin Kamara still questionable. Amari Cooper activated for the Cowboys. Not sure if he's going to play tonight or not, but he's still questionable. Dallas was started off 6-1. They had a chance to be undefeated as the one loss they had early in the year to Tampa Bay on opening Thursday night, was their only loss going into that 6-1 stretch. Then a couple of losses later, the big loss to Denver. They lost last week to the Raiders on Thanksgiving Thursday. So here they are at 7-4. They're in the number 4 spot. They lead the NFC East. They only lead it by 2 games now. We'll get to the Washington football team in a second, who's playing as well as anybody. Washington on a roll right now. New Orleans 5-6. They started off 5-2. They started off 4-2. They're one out of their last 5. They're in the number 10 spot. They dropped down from the 8th spot all the way down to the 10th spot as Washington moved up 5 spots in the NFC playoffs. So there we are for tonight, 6-46.5. Cowboys offense rolling. Cowboys defense, their secondary. They're going to have to figure out how to stop Taysom Hill. If they don't have Kamara, that takes one part of the equation out of it for Dallas. You got to think that Dallas is -6, 46.5. It might be a little too much. The Saints did not play well last Thursday night on Thanksgiving. They lost to Buffalo. They got hammered by Buffalo. Actually, Josh Allen threw the ball around on them. Buffalo doesn't run the ball very well. So if Dallas wants to be able to beat New Orleans tonight, I think they're going to have to pass the ball on them. They're going to have to make sure that they get back into step, because 7-5 with Washington at 5-6 is not a good way to go. The Washington football team, they will have Las Vegas this weekend as well, and that's a big game for the Raiders as well. We'll preview it all coming up, but let's review the week that was Thanksgiving week last week. The Lions are still winless, but I'm telling you, they're going to win a game, and they had that game won against the Bears. Cairo Santos with the game-winning kick in the morning to give the Bears the 19-17 victory. They are 4-7. They did not cover the -3, did Chicago. That was one of my favorite picks of the day on Thanksgiving. The Lions did cover the +3. The Raiders came out of nowhere to beat Dallas. Dallas is 7.5-point favorite last Thursday. They lose the game 36-33 in overtime. Derek Carr had one of his better games, did not throw the ball around like he did the week before against Cincinnati, and they're still in it as far as the AFC West. They're still in it in the playoff race as well, too. In fact, let me get it to you in terms of the playoff race. They're there in third place. The Kansas City Chiefs in first place. The Chargers in second place by virtue of their head-to-head over the Raiders. And then Denver at 6-5 and Las Vegas at 6-5. Actually, Las Vegas should be ahead of them. They beat the Broncos earlier. I don't think they have to play the Broncos again. Let me check the schedule here because I think ESPN might have this wrong here. Let's see. The Raiders at Baltimore. The Raiders at home against San Francisco. They did lose to Denver at home in week 16. They have the Raiders. So this is wrong. They should be in third place ahead of Denver right now. The division record, Denver 1-1, the Raiders 1-2. The conference record, Denver 3-4, the Raiders 4-3. But the Raiders should be in third place right now. That's a mistake on NFL on ESPN.com. Let me check NFL.com while I have it to make sure that that's correct. Anyway, moving on with the week that was. Cincinnati Bengals back in a roll. Boy, the Steelers, they just look terrible right now. Steelers at 5-6-1. They're going to have to figure out what to do here in terms of what's going on, because it's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of the teams go. Hang on, by conference here. Let's figure this out here because I'm trying to figure this out. They still have the Raiders behind the Broncos, so I don't know why that is unless I'm missing something. They haven't played the Broncos yet. The Raiders beat them. Denver's at the Chargers. Denver at Las Vegas in week 16. All right, we'll figure that out. But right now they have the Raiders in fourth place, and I'm trying to figure out why that's the case. The Bengals rolled all over the Steelers. No doubt about that one. The Bengals now 7-4. They are one game back of Baltimore, who beat Cleveland. Cleveland 6-6. Pittsburgh 5-1 now. But the Steelers, they did not look good at all. The Bengals just rolled over them. A big victory that they had last week. 41 points they put up on Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers, 41-10. Steelers got a late touchdown to make that even close. The Bucks get a late touchdown. This hurt me. Leonard Fournette, why didn't you just go down so you could kick the game-winning field goal? You score the touchdown with under a minute. They end up covering the -3 at Indianapolis, who had been playing very well lately. The Colts now at 6-6. They're 2 back of Tennessee, who got hammered by the Patriots. We'll get to that in a second. Tampa Bay now at 8-3. They are ahead of the Cowboys in the number 3 spot now. They're behind Arizona 9-2 and Green Bay at 9-3. The Buccaneers 8-3. They have this weekend, they have the Atlanta Falcons on the road, and the Indianapolis Colts are at Houston this weekend as well, too. So lots to talk about in the NFL. The Dolphins slammed Carolina. Christian McCaffrey out the rest of the year. He's going to have another surgery. Poor McCaffrey. He's been injured too many times in the last few years, and that's the fault of Carolina for having to use him too damn much for Carolina's for his sake. He's going to shorten his career the way it's going. New England blast Tennessee, the hottest team in football right now, the New England Patriots. How you doing, Dan Angst? I know you're a big Patriots fan. Lots of Patriots fans here in the Bay Area, and they do travel well. They are in first place. Unbelievably, they're in first place. 8-4 over the Bills, 7-4. They have a big game Monday night against the Buffalo Bills. The winner of that game will either stay in first place if it's New England or reclaim first place if it's Buffalo. Buffalo hosting New England, a 2.5-point favorite coming into that game on Monday. We'll have a full preview of it Monday at 3 o'clock on the Make the Money and Run podcast, 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific. But they blasted Tennessee, turned the ball over, forced Tennessee, who really looks different now that the league has adjusted to no Derrick Henry. Thought Tannehill and their wide receivers would come out and play better. They did have Adrian Peterson for a few weeks, and this Hilliard kid has run pretty well, but they turned the ball over too much, and they got blasted in the third and fourth quarters by New England. New England 8-4. They are now tied with Tennessee. Tennessee still leads the AFC South by 2 games. They're 8-4 as well, but the Colts charging hard in that division. So Indianapolis, that loss that they had to Tampa Bay really hurt them. They could have put them at 7-5 and 1 game back of Houston. And who would have thought that of Indianapolis, especially starting out 0-3. The Giants shocked the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles were right there in the playoff hunt. Now they're at 5-7. They drop a couple of spots in the playoff structure. The Giants 4-7. They're only 3 back. 3 back with 6 to go. 17-game schedule. That's not that far out. The way this division's going right now, but you got to fight out the Washington football team. They're the hottest team in that division. Still under 500, but they're in the 7th spot in the playoffs. The Eagles dropped down to the number 11 spot with that loss. They and Carolina, both at 7 losses, occupy the 11th and 12th spot. The Giants at 4-7, only because of wins, and the Bears at 4-7, only because of wins. They're in 13th and 14th. And then Seattle, what happened to Seattle on Monday night? And then Detroit, we already know, 10-1. They're in the 16th spot. But right now, Philadelphia went down from the 8th spot all the way down to the 11th spot by virtue of everything that happened last week. The Giants shocked the Eagles. Too many turnovers by Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts did not look good. Giants stopped the Philadelphia running game. The Philadelphia running game had been red hot going into the week, and yet the Giants shut them down. They got a turnover in plus territory as well, too, that allowed them to stop Philadelphia from scoring. So big shock in the Meadowlands, where the Giants, a 3-point underdog, actually a 4-point underdog, came back and beat Philadelphia. Atlanta in the playoff hunt over Jacksonville. They beat Jacksonville up pretty good. They are 9th now. They are tied with the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings beat them early in the year, so they have that over the head-to-head. I believe Minnesota wins tiebreaker over Atlanta based on win percent. Yeah, by conference games, division tiebreaker was initially used to eliminate New Orleans. Atlanta wins tiebreaker over New Orleans based on head-to-head. So New Orleans falls behind Atlanta, but they're right there in it as well, too. They're tied with the Vikings at 5-6. Washington in the 7th spot at 5-6. San Francisco has moved up to the 6th spot at 6-5, and they're only a game back of the Rams, 3 back of the Arizona Cardinals in the NFC West. They're playing as well as anybody. We'll get to the afternoon games in a second. The Jets beat Houston. The Jets and Giants won on the same day for the first time in 3 years. How about that? The New York Jets, Robert Saleh, they are getting themselves a little bit going now. 3-8. They're not going anywhere playoff-wise, but they have developed some kind of foundation. Zach Wilson looks to be the real deal. I know it was Houston, and Houston was favored in that game by 3, but it turned out to be the Jets ended up down 10-0, I believe it was. 14-3. 14-3 was what it was, and then the Jets came back at a touchdown, a 2-point conversion, and then overtook them with another touchdown to take an 18-14 lead and ended up winning 21-14. So the Jets beat Houston. The move for the number 1 pick still out there as well. Denver continues to force Justin Herbert into struggles. He's not had a fun time with the Denver Broncos. Denver beats them at home, a 3-point underdog. The Chargers now at 6-5. They are they're ahead of Denver still with 1 game to go, and they play one more time as well too. So Denver should be up on them as well in the standings as well too. As Denver is 6-5, the Raiders are 6-5, the Chargers are 6-5, and those Kansas City Chiefs in the 4 spot, leading the division at 7-4. They've won 3 out of their last 4, including that win over the Cowboys 2 Sundays ago. So Justin Herbert and the Tennessee and the LA Chargers continue to struggle against the Broncos. The Broncos with the victory last week. The Packers hold off the Rams. The Rams 3 in a row now from 7-1. They are 7-4. The Packers hold the number 2 seed. They are a game back of the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals are 9-2. The Packers 9-3. Green Bay has the tiebreaker over them. They beat them on that Thursday night a few weeks ago. But Green Bay with 3 losses, especially after their loss 2 weeks ago to Kansas City. They come out and beat the Rams. They were an underdog at home. Aaron Rodgers and the toe, all questionable. No Aaron Jones in the backfield, but A.J. Dillon has turned into a great running back for the Green Bay Packers, and they can rely on him a little bit. The Packers 7-2 in the conference now. That is I believe that's the best record. Dallas 5-1 by percentage in the conference, and that is the best record. Most wins within the conference. The Green Bay Packers are 7-2, 2-1 outside of the conference. They lost to Kansas City. They beat Denver, I believe, and then they have somebody else to play. I think they have the Chargers. I'll have to go back and check the schedule here, but anyway, Green Bay 9-3. They hold off the Rams, who are 7-4. They've got the bye. The byes this week, by the way, Cleveland, Green Bay, Tennessee, and Carolina. So maybe Aaron Rodgers can recover from that toe. Cleveland had a bad Sunday night game against Baltimore. Tennessee, we talked about them against the Patriots. And Carolina, no McCaffrey the rest of the year. Matt Rule going to have to figure out what they're going to do. They're still in the playoff hunt. They are in 12th place. And as I said, the Washington football team was in 12th last week, but they moved up 5 spots by virtue of tiebreakers and head-to-head matchups. And now they are the last team in the playoffs. As the old saying goes, if the playoffs started today. So the Packers hold off the Rams. The 49ers are hot. They're the hottest team right now. They've won 3 in a row. They beat the Minnesota Vikings. They moved to 6-5. They're above 500. Who would have thought that? Jimmy Garoppolo playing well. They're running the ball well. Elijah Mitchell, Hasty, both running the ball well. Deebo Samuel, Fred Warner, not going to be available this weekend for the big matchup in the NFC West division game against the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are not playing well. They're 3-8. We know how bad they are. They look terrible on Monday night, but this is a division game, and the Seahawks are 9-1 in the last 10 over the 49ers. The 49ers are a 3-point favorite over Seattle this weekend coming up on Sunday afternoon. We'll see if Russell Wilson can get the magic back. They've had success against the 49ers. They beat them earlier this year in Santa Clara, coming back from 14-0 down. That was a turnover-filled game. They played lousy on special teams, did San Francisco. And so this will be an interesting game if they want to keep that roll going. To get to 7 wins to where they are, we'll get to it as well. All right, we're going to welcome in Charlie O right now to the proceedings as we get to the NFL. As we get to the NFL Matter, Charlie O, Vasi Vada Party here on the Make the Money and Run podcast, sponsored by Britannia Arm. Charlie, we're going over the afternoon games in the NFL. The standings right now, the Washington football team. I just finished the NFL stuff. I'll get your takes on it a little bit. But how about the Washington football team? They moved up 5 spots from the 12th spot to the 7th spot by virtue of head-to-head matchups and conference records that they go from there. They're about as hot as anybody right now. Them and the 49ers are the 2 best teams right now in the NFC going.
Yeah, I mean, Vasu, what a crazy thing going on right now. I mean, exciting for fans. But, 2 weeks ago, we kind of thought, well, all right, we know everything that's going on. And now we don't know anything that's going on. And I think that everybody kind of poo-pooed this 17-game season. And I'm still concerned about it in relationship to injury. I think that is going to be a concern that we're going to have all the way through with this. But, man, you just throw that extra odd game in there. And it just, you kind of go, wow, this is just going to throw everything into chaos all the way through. And I think that's one of the things that I'm not sure the owners were that smart, but the people behind the scenes were saying to them, look, this will create the kind of chaos that you want for the fans. I'm sure the odds makers weren't thrilled with it because it just makes their lives just much more difficult. But yeah,
nobody's feeling sorry for the odds makers. I'm sorry.
Well, no,
certainly not our show.
You know I don't feel sorry for the odds.
I went 0-7 last Sunday, so nobody's feeling sorry for the odds makers. I had my worst Sunday ever, probably, and you know that we usually go 500 or a little bit better.
Oh yeah,
I went 0-7 on Sunday, and there were a lot of things that were going on. We'll get to all that in a second as well too. But how about the 49ers? You cover the 49ers. They're on your station there. 3 in a row, the game against the Vikings. I thought they would have a tougher game against the Vikings, and it was tough for a while. The Dalvin Cook injury certainly hurt Minnesota late in that game. And
right.
Now they're going to be without Deebo Samuel and Fred Warner going into really a division game against Seattle, even though Seattle's terrible at 3-8, and they looked horrible on Monday night. They are 1-9 in their last 10 against Seattle. And Russell Wilson does have some magic still left in him, I believe, in Seattle for this to be a big game, and the 49ers better not overlook them as they get to Seattle, and then they go to Cincinnati the following week, and then they have Atlanta at home. So this is a big 3-game stretch for them. And with the Rams faltering at 7-4 right now, they're only a game back of that number 2 spot. And who would have said that, speaking of chaos, 3 weeks ago?
Oh, no. But let's back up for a second and talk about Seattle this weekend. The problem for the 49ers is if this game were going to be at Levi's Stadium, then I would say, okay, they've kind of got the upper hand. The problem is they have to go to Seattle. And I know sometimes we make too much out of crowds and home field advantage and those kind of things. You cannot underestimate or underplay the crowd and the stadium in Seattle, because that place is one of the loudest, rowdiest, crazy places for a visiting team to have to play in any sport. They call the crowd the 12 because they really are like a 12th man on both offense and defense, and they designed that stadium to be loud. I mean, they literally did. So it is tough for any visiting team to go in there. And as you mentioned, the 49ers have not had success up there. So I don't care what the record is for Seattle. We always talk about the rivalry between the Rams and the 49ers. There really is a huge rivalry between the Seahawks and the 49ers, and it'll be a big game this weekend.
All right, let me clarify something I said earlier on the standings. ESPN had Denver ahead of Las Vegas in the standings, but on the expanded playoff format, Las Vegas is in the 8th spot. Denver is in the 9th spot. Las Vegas beat Denver on the road last week. The AFC West, the only division in football, unlike what we thought about the NFC West at the beginning of the year, the only division in football with everybody over 500. We were poo-pooing the Chiefs there after a 1-3 start, and here they are at 7-4, the number 4 spot, only a game back of Tennessee in the win column. They're even in the loss column with the Patriots, who are red hot. How you doing, Dan Angst? I know you're giving me a bad time about taking Tennessee last weekend, but and that was a bad pick, and that was part of an 0-7 week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Indianapolis Colts, another game we'll get to in a second. But as far as the afternoon games go last week, the Ravens beat up on the Browns, and that was just a horrible game to watch with all the turnovers there. Lamar Jackson, I don't think I've seen Lamar Jackson that bad at all. 4 turnovers all by himself, 4 interceptions in that game, 3 in that second quarter. They were lucky. We were lucky as a wagering show, and I had Baltimore -3. It was either going to be a push or Cleveland did stop him, and Justin Tucker, Mr. Reliable, kicks that field goal and makes it a winner for me at night. So actually not 0-7, but the Ravens came through for me as I added that late on my docket. So 1-7 makes me feel a little bit better. My last football game, and then I had Washington on Monday night. Yeah, 0-7, but I'm on a 2-game winning streak now, so I'm 2 out of my last 9, but 2 in a row counts going into this weekend. Let's go back to the early games here a little bit before we take a break. I already talked a little bit about it. You had poo-pooed Ben Roethlisberger all year, and sure enough, they did not look good against the Bengals. We were surprised when they beat them on the road in week 3 to see how good Cincinnati was at the beginning of the year. And sure enough, they rolled up 41 points. The defense played well for Cincinnati. Joe Mixon has turned himself into from the problem that he was a few years ago to a really good running back. Their receivers, Jamar Chase and Boyd, their tight end, Uzoma, really good. Joe Burrow coming back from the injury. He's not afraid to mix it with anybody else, and he'll run the ball, and he'll dive for end zones, and he'll do whatever it takes to win right now. That's their big deal. They're in the 5 spot. They're only a game back of Baltimore, and Baltimore is not that great. And remember, a month ago when they beat Baltimore on the road, they were the best team in the AFC record-wise. I think that was week 7 when they played them, and here they are. They're not that far out. If it wasn't for the division winners, they'd be right there at the best record, Charlie. Your Cincinnati Bengals we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I wasn't thrilled about Pittsburgh bringing back Roethlisberger, but I gotta be honest with you, Vasu. I didn't see that kind of domination coming with Cincinnati over Pittsburgh. I mean, Mike Tomlin
3.5 was the line, so neither did the odds makers. It wasn't 7 points.
I mean, Mike Tomlin was beside himself. I mean, I have never seen him that just befuddled in a post-game press conference.
What are you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, that was just domination and a team that just got beat up. But the Bengals now are a team that is dangerous because not only have they got talent, they've had some success, and now they really believe in themselves. So that makes them scary. And so you're right. They're playing great football, and they're out there just behind the top. And who would have said at the beginning, we thought they were going to be good this year, but we didn't think they were going to be great. And now they're great. And Baltimore better look over their shoulder because, they got somebody coming at them.
Oh,
And
they already are. They whooped them. Remember, they beat them in
yeah,
Baltimore 41-14. They are not underestimated. John Harbaugh hasn't lasted this long by overlooking teams. There's no doubt in my mind that they're going to be ready again. And I'm venturing to say that in week 18 they play each other. Pittsburgh, Baltimore. Let's see, Cincinnati. I got to think that they play Cincinnati, Kansas City, and then the 20 week. Yeah, Baltimore, Cincinnati on the day after Christmas, December 26th in week 16. So we're going to have 18 weeks this year, as we said going into it. So the Bengals are rolling. The Colts were on a big winning streak, and then they were right there with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They had them on the run. Colts 3-point underdog. Leonard Fournette decides to score a touchdown and take away that point spread from me as well, too. Instead of falling down like most guys do, he goes into the end zone. Couldn't believe it. These last-minute losses all year for us, Charlie, have really taken me by surprise, because it's never been this much of a frequency of losing games like that at the end of the game from a wagering standpoint, and also maybe even from a football standpoint for some people as well, too. That last second turnover where you lose the 2 points for one team and you get the 2 points for another team in fantasy football and daily fantasy sports. By the way, we'll have superdraft.io coming up next week. One of these weeks, we're going to get them going. We're going to start the league going. So Superdraft, download the app on Superdraft. But anyway, back to the Colts. Defensively, they got torn apart in the second half. They're only a couple of games back of the Tennessee Titans, who do not look very good. I think the league is adjusted to Derrick Henry right now. We saw what the Patriots did to Tennessee. They blasted them. They forced them to turn the ball over. Patriots are red hot right now. They're in first place. Who would have thought that by a half a game over Buffalo right now? They've got a big matchup on Monday night, which we'll preview fully on Monday at 3 Eastern on the Make the Money and Run podcast. But that AFC right now at the top, you look at Baltimore, New England. Baltimore, by virtue of record, the number 1 seed. New England, number 2. Who would have thought that? Tennessee at 3. Kansas City at 4. And then Cincinnati, Buffalo, and the Chargers 5-7, with the Raiders, Broncos, Indianapolis. I guess you can say Pittsburgh at 5-1 still. And then Cleveland at 6-6 is still there at 12. And then Miami, the Jets, Houston, and Jacksonville to round out. But that's 12 teams there that may not have a realistic shot, but they're still in it mathematically. And I'm talking about the Browns being behind Pittsburgh, and I think they're better than Pittsburgh.
Yeah, but at some point we've got to address the quarterback situation there, and not from a talent standpoint, but from a health standpoint. How much longer are they going to be able to put him out there?
You're talking about Baker Mayfield or Ben Roethlisberger?
Mayfield. He's going to become a tackling dummy at some point. I mean, seriously.
They hit him hard last Sunday night.
God bless the guy. I mean, if anyone dares say that guy's not tough, they're going to have to come face me. I'll take him out. I'll take him out back. I mean, seriously, he's not my favorite player, but good Lord, that man's going out there as beat up as any quarterback I've ever seen in my life. And I've watched a lot of football, but I'm really worried about his ongoing long-term health. I mean, I think they just need to get him out of there. I mean, I know they're trying to hang in there, but I'm worried about the guy's long-term career. I really seriously am. And I think they need to address that. I think they need to get him out of there and get him fixed up.
They're a running team, and their pass blockers is not very good, but their interior linemen are top 5 according to Pro Football Focus in terms of run blocking, and they just don't have the running game right now with Chubb being hurt and Kareem Hunt just coming off injured reserve. They got Dearness Johnson. He had a couple of good games too. They've got to get back to that running game. We said they've got this weekend. They have, where are they on the schedule here? They're off this weekend. So this will give Baker Mayfield hopefully a chance to rest, and maybe they can establish that running game when they come back in week 14. They're going to be hosting the Baltimore Ravens. So that's their big matchup with Baltimore to try and make hay back in the AFC North. All right, let me give you the last word here on Thursday Night Football before we take a break and get to the college games. Big college weekend, as we know, this weekend. Dallas is 6-point favorite. They started off 6-1. They're 7-4 now. They've fallen behind Tampa Bay from the 3 spot. They were in the 2 spot. They could have been 1. They lost opening night to Tampa Bay by a field goal. If they had won that game and gone off to 7-0, then who knows where they would be right now. Their secondary, very suspect. The Raiders exploited that, even with no Darren Waller last week on Thanksgiving Thursday. They lose that game at home to the Raiders. They're 7-4. Amari Cooper's activated, but he's still questionable for tonight. Kamara's questionable, and the Saints are the Saints have bagged the Trevor Siemian experience, and they're going with Taysom Hill tonight to start. And Dallas number 4 now, and the Saints at 10 by virtue of their loss last week to the Eagles.
Yeah, I'd like to say this is going to be a better football game than it is, but I think this is a yawner. Frankly, I really do. We have the game on the air, and I'm kind of sorry we do. I thought this was going to be a better game when I scheduled it. Dallas is rolling. New Orleans. We thought this was going to be a tough year for New Orleans when, you lose a Hall of Fame quarterback. Things are trying to move together. We thought maybe that Jameis Winston might come through.
They started off well. They were 4-2, and they beat Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I know. We're going, wow. Okay, this is we thought this might be the story of the year at the beginning of the season. Well, unfortunately, it's not. The story of the year is the New England Patriots. So, and probably Cincinnati. Those have probably become the two stories of the year. So, now I say that, and yet I don't know that I might not consider the underdog in this game, because what's been paying off in the National Football League?
Underdogs well over 500. I still have to put those numbers together, but I know after week 4 they were 38-26 for the 64 games that started. And I think there's only 2 weeks. We're in week 13 now. There's only 2 weeks of the 13 weeks where the favorites have outplayed the underdogs this year. And so the underdogs have done very well. The Saints got blasted last week. I think a lot of people were a little worried about Buffalo laying that many points last week on New Orleans Thursday night, Thanksgiving night. Buffalo finally put it together after their struggles for the previous few weeks, and they looked really good. And then now they've got 10 days off going into Monday night. How do you get a Thursday game and then you get all the way, and then you don't play all the way again until Monday night for the New England Patriots?
Somebody in the NFL office really, really likes you. I didn't say that out loud.
So they've got, not only do they have 10 days, they've got 11 days to get ready for a big division game at home, no less, against the New England Patriots, where they're not even a field goal favorite, and that's due to New England as hot as they are right now. All right, when we come back in 30 seconds, BCS football, the BCS rankings, championships Friday and Saturday this weekend. Lots to talk about in college football. Of course, we'll have our Friday football show, but we'll delve into it a little bit today, and then we'll go full board on the NFL and college football. We've also got Major League Baseball. They're locked out, but that didn't stop the owners from signing a whole bunch of people. And then, of course, we cannot forget about the NBA and some college basketball tonight. How do you score 29 points in a college basketball game? We'll tell you all that in a little bit as we come back with the Make the Money and Run podcast. Vasi Vada Party, Charlie O, intern Nick tomorrow. We'll have some guests coming up next week as well, too. But back in 30 seconds with the BCS wrap-up and a small preview of Championship Friday and Saturday this weekend. Welcome back to the Make the Money and Run podcast. We're here every Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Mondays at 3, Thursday and Friday right now at 1 o'clock Eastern. Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter live. Thanks to everybody joining us right now. If you missed any of the live broadcast, don't forget to check out our selections every day during the week by 6 Eastern on all our social media pages. We also have a Facebook group page as well, too. We're sponsored by the Britannia Arms of Capitola. Check them out. Facebook.com/Britannia Arms Capitola. 831-464-2583 and the Britannia Arms of Cupertino, BritanniaArmsDeanza.com, 408-252-7262. NFL Sunday Ticket, a great place to go watch Sunday Ticket, especially if you're in Capitola on the beach. The weather we've had in California. Sorry, East Coast people, the weather we've had in California. Anybody saw my page the other day, saw how beautiful it was yesterday or the day before when I was down there. for November 30th. And I'm going like, this is unreal that it's November 30th. And it looks like this. It's about 80 degrees. It felt like it was 80 degrees down there. And, of course, the Cupertino one, where all the businesses are in the heart of Silicon Valley.
It was beautiful there, too.
It was beautiful there, too. There's no doubt about that. All right, let's get into college football here a little bit. We've got conference championships galore going on this weekend. We'll just hit a little bit in order by virtue of the rotation. Friday night, the Conference USA game, Western Kentucky 3-73, Texas San Antonio 11-1, Western Kentucky 8-4, but Western Kentucky favored a little bit. Charlie, got a little 30-second deal on this.
I'm really surprised that Western Kentucky is favored in that. San Antonio's been so tough this season. I'm still scratching my head on that one. The Roadrunners 11-1 on the season. I don't understand it.
I've got top 25 at one point too.
Yeah. And kind of excited because everybody was going to poach their coach, and now he said he's going to stay put. So I think that's got to be just a mental what do I want? Motivator for the team, because they know they're not going to lose him. So I've got to sit down and look at that one a little closer, because right off the top, that screams underdog for me. Just immediately. They're especially because it's at home. So I don't know.
It's tough. We'll hit the power
right off the top.
Right. We'll hit the Power 5 conferences in a second, but as we say in the wagering industry, all these games pay the same. So we're going to hit them all real quick.
Oh, yeah,
absolutely. Kent State 3.5 in the MAC football conference. We love the MAC. Kent State 3.5 over Northern Illinois. Kent State 7-4. Northern Illinois 8-4. We know the offense rules in the MAC. 74 points the total here. That game going to be, I think they play that game in Detroit, right? They used to play the game in MAC in Detroit. I don't have the listing of the field. I'll tell you in a second here. I
think they play it at Ford Field.
They play at Ford Field in Detroit. The game on Saturday morning, 9:00 on the West Coast time for the MAC. Kent State 3.5 over Northern Illinois. It seemed to me Northern Illinois had their offense going this year. Defensively, they were struggling all year, and I think they gave up a lot of points. But I got to think Kent State is probably the play here in terms of the game.
Hey, listen, they live up to their nickname, the Golden Flashes. I mean, this Kent State can score. Sometimes if they get going, that offense gets going, they score at will. I mean, it is just crazy. And I know when you look at that over and under, you kind of go, what?
Yeah, no, that's routine for the MAC.
Yeah, I mean,
late high 60s, low 70s are always routine for the MAC.
If you look at the logs, the win-loss logs for these teams, you will look at those over and unders and you'll go, oh my gosh. I mean,
two more non-power conference games to look at. The Sun Belt, Appalachian State. We know their story from years ago. 3.5-point favorite over Louisiana Lafayette, who's had a pretty good year in that Sun Belt conference. They're 11-1, but they're a 3.5-point underdog as well too. This is in the NFL. We don't pertain to say that the underdogs have dominated in college football like they have in the NFL, but this ULL team, 11-1, 3.5-point underdog. The game is in Lafayette, Louisiana. So they're going to be playing that game on Cajun Field. So it's kind of a home game for ULL there, and they're a 3.5-point underdog. You got to think that's one for Louisiana Lafayette to get there, Charlie.
Yep, and I got to say it. See, you understand? I got to say it. It's Louisiana Lafayette. Okay, Lafayette. The Raging Cajuns are always tough, especially at home. But Appalachian State, you can't sleep on those guys. And like you said, it's college football, so you can't automatically go underdog there. So do your homework, look at the logs, really check out the injury list, look at everything there, because that game, again, it's a game that's not going to come top of mind because it's not a Power 5 conference.
Right.
You're going to want to watch that game because that's interesting.
Yeah, Lafayette, very interesting team. I've seen them play a couple of times this year. All right, the last non-power game, Jackson State 7, Prairie View 43.5 with that matchup as well too, as I got a little mosquito flying around my face here. There we go. 43.5. Jackson State over Prairie View. Don't know much about the SWAC, but want to make sure we got that out there because there will be people that watch that. That game's not even listed on my screen because it's not Division 1-2, so I don't even know when that game is. I'm assuming it's Saturday as well too. So let me see if I got that on my. I'll get that on my betting sheet because it came up on my betting sheet. But anyway, Jackson State Prairie View, Jackson State 7, 43.5. All right, we move on to Friday night, the power conferences. This was a matchup 2 weeks ago that did not make Oregon look very good. Utah Utes ran all over the Oregon Ducks. Too bad Nick's not here to hear this right now. But Utah 3-58, the game in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium. Tomorrow night, ABC has the coverage, 8 o'clock Eastern on ABC. Oregon at number 10 in the BCS rankings. They hurt themselves big time when they lost to Utah. They got blasted. Let's face facts here. They didn't just lose; they got blasted by Utah. Utah ran. I want to say they ran for at least 250 yards on Oregon. It was 21-0 right off the bat. I was watching that game. We all had Oregon. We couldn't believe Oregon was an underdog going into Utah. Not only did we look bad, there were a lot of people who looked bad in that. Yeah, no doubt about it. 38-3, I believe the score ended up being. I switched over to other games at that point. What's going to be different, Charlie, in this game other than being a neutral field? 10-2 Oregon, Utah 9-3. I never thought Oregon was as consistent as they should have been all year. The loss to Stanford and now this loss to Utah. I know they beat Ohio State early in the year, but I just didn't think they were good enough to be in the top 4. And now Utah proved that 2 weeks ago with that drubbing that was on national TV. It was the game of the night that night. ABC had that game of the night that night.
Well, Vasu, the other thing is that we felt as a show early on when they put Oregon in that top 4, we kept consistently saying, hey, they're in there because they want to keep the people on the West Coast interested in the college football playoffs. And I'm sorry, folks, we were right, because Oregon was there by virtue of the fact that they beat Ohio State and they were trying to keep us interested in the college football playoffs. And when they lost that second game to Utah, they were out and they're there. The thing, Vasu, I think that's going to be tough for Utah is especially in college football. Historically, it is really tough for a team to sweep a 2-game series. And so I think that's going to be the problem for Utah. Oregon they've got great coaching. They do have talent, and they're going to make a lot of adjustments. They've had a lot of time to watch film. Boy, did I just get old. Well, we still call it film. They've had a lot of chances to watch that tape and see what was there and know what to do. So there's going to be a lot of adjustments made there. I mean, it certainly won't be any kind of a runaway because Utah is too talented of a team to have that happen. But it's going to be tough for Utah to make a 2-game sweep out of an opportunity to meet each other twice.
All right, the Pac-12 game tomorrow night, ABC, 8 o'clock Eastern. Saturday morning, West Coast time, noon Eastern, the Big 12. Baylor holds off Texas Tech last week, and by virtue of that, they are in the championship game in the Big 12 against Oklahoma State, and not a renewal of Bedlam from Saturday night, by the way, which was a great game. Oklahoma State, Oklahoma turned out to be a great game. They did not cover. If you had Oklahoma State late at 4.5, you did not cover. So that was another one on my ledger of losing by a half point. That safety hurt, and the fumble return that got muffed that allowed Oklahoma to score 2. So that's 9 points they got. Otherwise, Oklahoma State played pretty well for most of the game. I know Spencer Sanders, I forget the kid's name. Spencer Sanders, the quarterback for Oklahoma State, didn't have a great game, but they did enough to get by Oklahoma. They're in the championship game. They're number 5 in the BCS right now. They've got a Baylor team that just barely got by Texas Tech. Here's the rail on that. It's going to be in Dallas tomorrow night. Oklahoma State about a 5.5 point favorite, 46.5 the total. They're 11-1. The only loss Oklahoma State had, I just saw this too, and I forgot who it was. They beat Boise State on the road. I'll get to it in a second. They lost to Iowa State on the road. They were a 2.5 point underdog there, and Iowa State ended up getting the win and coming back on them. That's their only loss. Baylor's two losses were to Baylor's two losses. I have it right here. Baylor's two losses were to, I'll get to in a second here. They beat Texas. They lost to TCU the week after Gary Patterson got fired. And then they lost. Actually, I don't have their other loss. Anyway, they have two losses. Take my word for it, folks. They lost to Oklahoma State. So they did lose to Oklahoma State early in the year. So that's a head-to-head rematch for their game earlier. So they lost to Oklahoma State and they lost to TCU as a favorite on the road the week after Gary Patterson got fired by TCU. So what's your take on the Big 12 here, Charlie? Games in Dallas.
Well, I think the problem for Baylor is going to be is one number 5. You got an Oklahoma State team that's sniffing, going, man, we won in that top 4. And I think that they want to go in there and prove that. Let's just face the facts. They're going to want to go in there and say, look, we're the Big 12. We want to bump Cincinnati out of the top 4. I don't think they necessarily, even with a big win, I don't think they can do that, because I think that Cincinnati, unless Cincinnati just, throws up all over themselves in their championship game, will get bumped out of there. But I think as long as they're wearing that number 5 number, I think they're motivated to go in. Now, I think it'll be a tough game because, again, here we go. It's the second game of the year on a head-to-head matchup. So I think it'll be a tough game, but I think Oklahoma State's got the motivation because of where they are, and they're going to want to try to jump into that top 4. So Baylor, I don't think you'll get ugly. I don't think you'll embarrass yourselves, but I don't see a Big 12 championship in your future.
We'll do a full preview of it tomorrow, but do you think offhand, just off the top of your head, 5.5, maybe too many for Baylor?
No.
Right, to be determined on the Friday football show, 1 Eastern, 10 a.m. tomorrow for the Week 13 NFL and Championship Saturday, Championship Friday. All right, speaking of number 5 and number 4, here we go. Cincinnati, the site, Nippert Stadium, the site for Cincinnati, a 10.5-point favorite over Houston, 53 the total. We know all about Cincinnati. They're number 4, 12-0 in the league. Houston had more conference wins, so they actually ended up winning the regular season title. Their only loss was to Texas Tech early in the year. 11-1 for the Houston Cougars. 10.5, Cincinnati's had a tough time covering this year. And you don't think they want to go in there and beat their rival? I mean, this is a big-time rival in the American Conference between Houston and Cincinnati. If it wasn't for Cincinnati, we'd be talking about Houston a lot more elevated in terms of the BCS rankings or in terms of the national scope, something that they haven't been talked about probably 25, 30 years since the days of Andre Ware when they were running and gunning. But 11-1, 10.5-point underdog going into Cincinnati, which is tough, yes. 53 the total. But boy, that Desmond Ridder and that defense and Luke Fickell and the way that they've gone about their business this year, I know they didn't cover a lot of games. They had a Friday night game a few weeks ago on the road where they did not cover, but they looked pretty good, dominant defensively. 10.5 points seems a lot, though, to me, Charlie. And this is a big game, and they know what the stakes are, because if they lose, then clearly Oklahoma State, even Notre Dame is looking at some of these teams to lose. We'll get to the SEC in a second because that's a big one as well, too, for 4, 5, and 6 as well. But let's hit the American right now, Charlie.
Well, I think that 10.5 points is a lot of points, and will give me pause about what I want to do in that game. But as far as the top 4, Cincinnati needs to do at least that 10.5 points, if not more, which is not necessarily fair, but they need to continue to win big to prove to everybody that they deserve to be in that top 4, because that's what you have to do if you're a team outside that Power 5. You've got to do extraordinary things in order to prove that you deserve to be there. So that's just the penalty for being outside the Power 5. I think the problem is going to be, and I think you're absolutely right, you got Houston at 11-1, and nobody's been talking about Houston. So you've got a team that's kind of coming in out of the shadows, and they're not going to come in there and lay down. And of course, what's their motivation? Their motivation is they want to knock Cincinnati out of the top 4. I mean, that would be the story of the year, right? I mean, if they could do that. So you're going to have a Cougars team that's going to come in motivated, and I mean motivated to knock the Bearcats out of the top four. So this has the potential to be a good game. What will keep this game from being a good game is if Cincinnati comes out of the gate hot and scores early and puts them down. That will be the key for Cincinnati, is to come out, score early, and put the Cougars down early. They, if they can come out and put them right down in that first quarter, then they've got the situation. But they don't want to let Houston be in this game and have it be a real game in the fourth quarter.
Last Uvada Party, Charlie O here, the Make the Money and Run podcast, sponsored by the Britannia Arms of Cupertino and Capitola, previewing college football Friday and Saturday, championship Friday and Saturday. Of course, the full Friday football show will be here tomorrow at 1 Eastern, 10 a.m. on the Pacific, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We're giving you a little appetizer going into Friday and Saturday. But again, the full football show tomorrow. We'll hit the NBA in a second. All right, Mountain West, San Diego State 6, Utah State. That game on Fox, 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 on the Pacific. 50 the total. San Diego State's only loss to Fresno State. They came back on Boise State last week in a game that I really thought Boise State was going to win. Favored by 3 in that field, 9 o'clock in the morning for San Diego State on the West Coast time in Carson, playing in that stadium. Boise State had a big lead. They let San Diego State come back in the third quarter, and then San Diego State dominated that fourth quarter. Here's Utah State. They played well all year. They have 3 losses: Boise State, BYU, and Wyoming. Nothing to sneeze at. Boise State's very well regarded. They had Oklahoma State down in that game early in the year, and Oklahoma State came back on Boise State on the blue turf. BYU, we know where BYU is ranked all year, so they lose to them. They get blown out by them. And then Wyoming, probably the only surprise on the road. They lose. They lose to Wyoming. Actually, they were at home and they lost to Wyoming. Wyoming came in and beat them 44-17. So here's San Diego State, nearly a touchdown favorite against Utah State. San Diego State's offense, at least the last 3 weeks I've seen, not been as good as it was at the beginning of the year. But Utah State, they've got that running game that can really neutralize San Diego State's defense and keep that San Diego State offense off the field. Charlie, 6 too much for Utah State?
Maybe, especially because Vasu, have you seen the same thing that I've seen, that San Diego State is Jekyll and Hyde? I mean, they've scared me in every game that I've wagered on them. They just, they come in, they're favored. And you go, wow, okay, San Diego State, this high-powered offense, boom, we're going to get out there. And then they get out there and they're just, okay, when are you going to kick into the gear? When are you going to kick into the gear? And instead of getting into fourth gear, they're running in second. And I don't understand it. This is not a Brady Hoke team. You're used to them getting out and just, starting to mow down. And I don't see the speed. I don't see the consistency. They're just not the powerful offense that I've seen San Diego State be in the past. And Utah State, nobody knows anything about them because it's the Mountain West and people don't watch them as close, and Utah State's in Logan and nobody pays any attention to them. Don't sleep on that team. Do not sleep on that team. They've got a great coach. They got kids that go to Utah State were kids that wanted to go to BYU and wanted to go to Utah, and they didn't get picked there. And Utah State says, "Come on, kids, come over here. We're gonna help you get to where you want to go." And so they're motivated. And I know I've used that word motivated a lot. Folks, this is the time of year where motivated players make a difference. Trust me.
Yeah.
Okay. Trust me. And so don't sleep on Utah State in this game.
3 o'clock Eastern on Fox. I said 3:30 earlier, but it's 3 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock in Carson, California, the temporary home of San Diego State. So they have that going in their favor, number 19 in the country.
That's, by the way, just quickly, I took a look at the new stadium setup in San Diego State last week.
Beautiful. Yeah.
What a beautiful setup that's going to be.
Can't wait. Another reason to go to San Diego, that's for sure. I got the Holiday Bowl in about a few weeks. So I'm trying to figure out where they're going to play that game. So Hopefully it's in San Diego before I get my assignment. But
I
I
don't
love
think
going to San Diego anytime I get. All right. The last one before we get to the big two will be the ACC. How about the Pittsburgh Panthers? Boy, they came out of nowhere. Everybody thought it was Clemson all year. North Carolina with Sam Howell, potential Heisman candidate. That just didn't work out for them. Our friend Yogi Roth is a University of Pittsburgh wide receiver, played back in the early 2000s with Larry Fitzgerald, and then came out west and was a graduate assistant at USC. But he said on our preview show at the beginning of the year, he said, don't underestimate the Pittsburgh Panthers. And boy, Kenny Pickett certainly has turned in a Heisman year. They looked good last week. They played well all year. The one game against Miami that they struggled, they lost to Miami and they lost to Western Michigan. They're 10-2. Wake Forest 10-2. They lost to Clemson late in the year, and that UNC game where they were up 18 points and ended up losing that game 55-52. Another one of my half-point losses, by the way, this year. How about that? I think I just recount my whole year and go see my wagering shrink or something like that.
I was going to say, you need to go see your therapist.
Yeah, my wagering therapist, not my regular therapist.
That's no.
Yeah, no, there's a wagering therapist. Trust me out there, folks. There's a wagering therapist. Three is the line as we get back to more serious matters here. 3 for Pittsburgh, Wake Forest, the underdog, 71.5. Here's that total again. We know Wake Forest, Sam Hartman's had a good year. They touted him as potential Heisman candidacy, and then Pickett. I mean, these two quarterbacks, they can sling it. And I see a lot of offense in this game, Charlie, with Pittsburgh and Wake Forest. The game, I believe, they usually play this. Yeah, they play it in Charlotte, the home of the Carolina Panthers. So it's going to be in Charlotte. No real neutral site. Wake Forest, I guess, would have a little more of an advantage because they're closer in proximity to where they're being played. ESPN has Pittsburgh at 61.5%, 38.5% for Wake Forest. And I'm wagering to say that that's because Wake Forest's defense that was so good the first 8 weeks was so bad the last 4 weeks. And they got some wins out of it. They ended up 10-2, but they could have easily ended up 8-4 based on how that defense played toward the end of the year. Quick thought on the ACC.
I think Wake Forest is a pretender. I thought after they gave it up to North Carolina that they showed who they really are. And I think Pittsburgh, I think Pittsburgh all of a sudden revealed themselves to who they really are. And I think the Pittsburgh Panthers will be the champions of the ACC.
Yeah,
so I just revealed. I don't know what the wager. I would have to sit down and really look at what I'm going to look at on the wager. But as far as who's going to win that game, Panthers.
8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock on the West Coast on ABC, the ACC championship game. All right, the last two we're going to go into have big BCS implications for the top 4. Number 2, Michigan, who took apart my Ohio State Buckeyes last week, really took them apart. Jim Harbaugh, they pulled out the kitchen sink on every aspect last week in Michigan. The game was at home for them. They had a big crowd, 105,000. The snow was coming down. Big time offenses for both teams. I thought Ohio State's defense looked really porous, and they could not stop the run. Haskins has turned out to be a pretty good running back. The Blake Corum turned into a really good, versatile third down type back. I would imagine he'd be like a third down type back in the NFL. He was injured in the middle part of the year, so they've used both their running backs. McNamara was okay. The second half, he looked so much better. The secondary was just falling all over the place for Ohio State. They get a big win over the Buckeyes, knock Ohio State out of probably any BCS championship at all. They're number 2. They go up against Iowa, 10.5-point favorite. The game in Indianapolis, 43.5 the total. We know Iowa has a tough time scoring. Their over-unders have been somewhere between 36 and 43 all year. The only loss for Michigan was that wild one to Michigan State. Iowa came back 21-7 down to Nebraska last week in Nebraska. Scored 21 straight, ended up winning that game, ended up by virtue of all the tiebreakers, taking over Minnesota and taking over Wisconsin to get into this championship game. Purdue beat them and Wisconsin beat them, the only 2 losses that Iowa's had, and even yet they're still in the championship game against Michigan. Confidence from Ohio State going into a 10.5-point spread, 43.5. Probably a lot of confidence because they want to stay at number 2, and they probably will if they can come out with a win in this game. Iowa's pretty tough defensively, but I don't know if they have the offense to keep up with Michigan, especially on the turf, indoors, climate-controlled conditions.
Fast moving train.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
Fast moving train. Poor Iowa.
Yeah, I got a feeling 10.5 might not be enough.
You know, they've had a very, very nice season, but you've got a Michigan team that's coming off a goal that they've had for so long, and now not only did they beat Ohio State, they're in the top 4. Dude, I mean that's you just I mean you would have to play the game of the century
Yeah.
to stop Michigan at this point. I just feel that way. Now I don't know that 10.5 you know, that as far from a wagering standpoint, that I'm going to have to look at that. But man, fast.
Well, Iowa's offense has struggled all year. We know that. They beat Iowa State early in the year. Defense took over that Iowa State game. They were number 2 in the country after beating Penn State. They pushed on that game at -3 against the Penn State team that was offensively challenged as well, too, in the middle part of the year. And then when they were number 2 the following week, they were about 11.5 point favorite when Purdue came in and knocked them out. Not only did they knock them out, they knocked them out in Iowa City as an 11.5 point underdog when Purdue was playing really well at that point as well, too. So that tells me that somewhere in the middle of the year, Iowa's offense went south and Michigan started picking up their offense. The Michigan State game aside, even that game, they had a lot of offense. They just couldn't stop Michigan State. And Walker, the running back for Michigan State, ended up running for 3 or 4 touchdowns in that game. If it wasn't for Michigan State, we could be talking about a clear-cut number 2 for Michigan behind Georgia right now. Georgia still only giving up 7.5 points, and we'll get to that in a second. But the Big Ten championship, lots of BCS implications. We'll break it down further on the Friday football show. But let's hit the SEC real quick before we get to the NBA. Georgia's 6.5 in Alabama, obviously the game of the year going into the weekend. Georgia number 1, Alabama, their only loss to Texas A&M, 12-0, 7.5 points, as I said, they've allowed all year. Their front 7 is all NFL ready. They're faster than a lot of skill players and a lot of other college teams, and maybe even faster than some of the NFL guys that are out there as well, too. Yeah. And here's Alabama. They struggled against Auburn last week in the Iron Bowl. They were able to come back, make that big comeback in the fourth quarter thanks to the touchdown and then the 2-point conversions, which I don't like in the overtime, but that's what they're going to do. And it hurts a lot of point spreads, by the way. Not that it would have mattered in this game. Alabama was a 20-point favorite on the road. And give Auburn credit. You know what? They didn't have Bo Nix, and everybody thought it was going to be a whitewash game with no Bo Nix. Finley played great, and their defense played really well. And maybe this is a sign that Alabama is not as good as they were going into Georgia because, by the way, this is the first time in 93 games that Alabama is an underdog going into a game. The last time, that's about 7.5 years, according to my math. Yeah, so they're a 6.5 point underdog. And it may not be enough, Charlie. JT Daniels, Stetson Bennett, their running game, that front 7. If Auburn got to Bryce Young, don't you think Georgia will get to Bryce Young?
Absolutely. I mean, I was really surprised about what happened in that Auburn game. I really was. I thought Alabama would be ready to go in there and make a statement, especially because they're at number 4, and you know that's the precarious spot. You know you don't want to be there and let somebody slide in on you. Now, I have to be honest with you, Casey. Turn down your sound. Alabama's going to get in, okay? Yeah. Because they don't want the playoffs.
Even if they get blown out, Cincinnati wins.
What's that?
Are you talking about in the BCS?
Yeah.
But what if Cincinnati wins? And who's 3 right now?
Well, Cincy's 3, right?
No, Cincy's 4. Michigan's 2. And I'll tell you in a second here.
Well,
Alabama's 3. Of course, we're talking about Alabama.
Yeah, okay.
If Alabama gets blown out, Cincinnati wins, and Oklahoma State runs the table on Baylor, and I don't know what they're going to do with Notre Dame. I don't think Notre Dame can move up. So
Notre Dame's done.
So we're talking about the top 5.
Brian Kelly totally screwed that.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that tomorrow. We'll talk about the coaching changes and all that.
Yeah, but seriously, I just quickly that coaching move. Notre Dame's out of it. Okay. They're already talking about that out loud. So that Notre Dame's not a factor at this point.
Right. So we're
But
looking at the 5 teams. Oklahoma State rolls Baylor. Cincinnati rolls Houston, or even beats Houston. Houston's 11-1, no slouch. And Alabama gets routed by Georgia. I mean, Georgia stays in no matter what. If they lose, they're going to be in. They're going to be in the top.
Yeah, no,
Georgia's no doubt about that, and that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt somebody later on down the stretch. Alabama can move up to 2, or Michigan can move up to 1. I mean, we can break this all down tomorrow with Nick. Nick has a good handle on all this stuff as well too. But yeah, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Mississippi, Baylor, Oregon, 6 through 10, all gone. It's about the top 5 right now, and I like Oklahoma State's chances because I just don't think that. I don't think Alabama is going to play well against Georgia on Saturday. I'd be surprised if they cover.
For Oklahoma State to get in, one of 2 things have to happen. Cincinnati has to lose, or Georgia has to literally knock out Alabama.
Right.
And I mean literally knock them out.
And I think they will.
They have to beat them by 20, 25 points. I mean, it has to be one of the ugliest losses in the history of Alabama football. I mean,
that's perfect because they're only 6.5-point favorites.
Spoken like a true gambler.
That's exactly right. All right, let's hit the NBA here a little bit. Well, again, we'll have all the Friday football show shenanigans with the NFL. We'll preview all the NFL games. We'll preview all the college football games in depth. We just did the college football Friday and Saturday. We have our ideas about it, but we'll definitely get into it more. Don't forget 6 o'clock Eastern every day, today and tomorrow, and then 3 times Saturday, twice on Sunday for college football and the NFL as well too. The NBA, we had our game of the year already at game 20 Tuesday night, the Phoenix Suns and the Golden State Warriors. I say the Warriors would have won that game if they didn't turn the ball over. Half the turnovers were unforced errors. If this was Tatis, we would be looking at one of the players going like, wow, that was terrible because of the unforced errors. Curry's not going to shoot great every time. I give Phoenix's defense a lot of credit. DeAndre Ayton played well. Maybe Golden State doesn't have enough big men to maintain that scenario. If Ayton comes out and plays well again on Friday night, then maybe you got an issue with the big man that you have for Golden State right now. But Golden State and Phoenix, everybody talks about Utah being the 3rd team. They're a distant 3rd if they are 3rd, but I still think there's other teams in the West that can compete. Your take on Tuesday night, because clearly that was the best game of the year so far to this point. Maybe not the best one for Golden State, but that was definitely the most hyped going into Tuesday night.
Yeah, interestingly enough, my grandson was there. My grandson is down at Grand Canyon University, and he scraped together every cent that he had so he could get to that game because he's a gigantic Warriors fan. And that's exactly what he said. He said that the Warriors just didn't take care of the ball. And that he think if they would have not had the unforced turnovers, that would have been a situation where the game would have been much closer. He said that he's not sure they would have won, but it would have been much closer. And so that, that's any game, turnovers to assist ratio. People always, shooting percentage, 3-point percentage. Folks, watch turnover to assist ratio. That in close games, that usually makes the difference on what's going on there. And that doesn't come from me. That comes from a former NBA head coach. Okay. So that's what you've got to watch in these games. Now, the other thing, and I don't necessarily think it's going to be gigantic impact, but Klay Thompson's been recalled to the Golden State Warriors. Mentally, that could have an impact. It could have some scoring impact as well with the Warriors. So that's going to be another one. That's going to be another wild card to toss into that game.
Phoenix played really well the other night, but they were only limited to 104 points. Both teams played great defense. The over-under 221 in that game Tuesday night got nowhere near, even though it looked like it was going to go over at 35-31. I had the Warriors +3 the other night. Looked good for about 3.5 quarters, and then the fourth quarter, the turnovers came in the last 5 minutes. All right, Utah 14-7, Dallas 11-9. I'm not sold on Dallas. Memphis at 5, 11-10. The Lakers have moved up to the 6th spot, 12-11. The Clippers, the Trailblazers, the Timberwolves, all 11-11, 7-9 there, and then Denver 10-11. They played better since Jokic has come back in. I think they're going to make a move. In the East, Brooklyn 15-6. They had a tough game with the Knicks the other night, 7.5-point favorite. They end up winning on a late basket. Washington still playing well. They beat up on somebody yesterday. I had somebody yesterday. the Timberwolves. They beat up on the Timberwolves, who played well yesterday. A 4.5-point favorite there. 14-8. Milwaukee 14-8. They're turning around a little bit. The Bulls, who have the Knicks tonight, 2-point favorite on the road at New York, 14-8. Miami, number 5. No Jimmy Butler the last 2 games. They got manhandled the other night, 13-9. Cleveland 12-10. Atlanta 12-10. Boston 12-10. Charlotte in the 9th spot at 13-11. And the Knicks have fallen a little bit at 11-10. And then you've got Philadelphia at 11-11. And then Toronto, Indiana, Orlando, Detroit, all single-digit win totals at this point, as we're about, I would say, a little bit less than a quarter, maybe about a quarter of the way through the year. Everybody's about 20 games right now, so we're about a quarter of the way through the year. I still think the West is better, top to bottom. Brooklyn looks pretty good. They just don't score. They don't play enough defense for me. Washington's still a surprise. Milwaukee, Milwaukee's going to turn it around. If they get healthy, they're probably the best team of that group, even better than Brooklyn. And then Miami, you don't know what Miami teams you're going to get. Cleveland has surprised everybody, even without Colin Sexton. They're 12-10, and they won outright. They won big yesterday. And Atlanta at 12-10, and I thought they'd be better than that. The games today we have are the Bulls are favored by 2 against the Knicks. The Bucks are favored by 4.5 on the route. In fact, I have it on here right now. Bulls are 209.5 at New York, 740. Bucks are 4.5 on the road, 216 at Toronto. Memphis 9.5 at home to Oklahoma City, 212.5. Phoenix, before their big game tomorrow night in San Francisco, I almost said Oakland, in San Francisco, 208 against the Pistons, who gave the Lakers a tough time. And then Portland, who's going to be without Dame Lillard for 10 days, 5-point favorite against the San Antonio Spurs, 216 the total. Takes on the NBA here, Charlie, as far as these games tonight and just overall as we get to the quarter mark of the season.
Well, it's interesting, and we got a lot of surprises going on. But you know what? One thing that I learned from Dave Yeager when he was the head coach at Sacramento is he said, "Don't believe anything until 30 games are into the season." He said because it takes 30 games for everything to settle down for every team, and he said once 30 games are in, then you can start to really draw and make a real opinion on what's happening with every team. So you still have about another 10 games for everything to start to settle out. 10 games from now, if the Wizards are still playing the way they're playing, then I'll think, okay, they're for real. And I'm not saying that they won't be, but I want to see this next 10 games. Yeah. Brooklyn, I'm not surprised Brooklyn's where they are, and I don't think Brooklyn's going to play any defense because they weren't built to play any defense. They were built to blow teams out. And
they're not even doing that.
Well, but they will at some point. Okay, maybe, I don't know. I hate the way they were put together. So
yeah, we'll get those point spread. We'll get those point spread numbers next week. And
I'm not going to go into all that. I like the Bulls. I'm just surprised as all get out at the Cavaliers. I mean, I really am. Phoenix, Golden State. I think that's going to continue to be the real story. We
don't need 30 games for them. We know they're real.
There's some things that are going to tell the story, and I still think that the Lakers and the Clippers will become relevant in the West. Okay. I mean, they've got, it was like the other night in Sacramento, LeBron all of a sudden's in protocols.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're going to have this. I mean, look all over all sports right now. Folks, we're still still worldwide, we're still dealing with COVID stuff, and we're going to have that. That's just going to it's just going to happen. And so, but the Lakers are going to pull it together. And I heard people last night going, "Oh my gosh, the Sacramento Kings beat the Clippers." Well, Paul George was on rest, and if I were the Clippers, I would have put Paul George on rest last night too, because the Kings are horrible. Last night they just happened to put it together.
Yeah, he's been playing great too, Paul.
Yeah, George. If Paul George was in that game last night, there's no way that the Clippers would have lost.
See, we would not have taken. Nick and I would not have taken that game.
They made a drive at the end of the game that if they'd have put the drive together about 5 minutes earlier, they'd have won the game.
Yeah, Nick and I would never have taken the Clippers yesterday if we had known Paul George was out.
Yeah. So they're going to make a drive in there. So I think it's going to come down to a 4-team race in the West. And I think it's going to be the two LA teams, Golden State and Phoenix. And so that'll become the horse race there. But anybody that's telling you the two LA teams are out of it, you just don't know NBA basketball. I'm sorry.
I just don't like LA. That's the whole thing.
They're both teams are way too talented. They're not going to wind up being 500 teams.
No doubt. We're sponsored by the Britannia Arms of Cupertino. Check them out at BritanniaArmsDeanza.com, 408-252-7262. The Britannia Arms on the shores of the Pacific Ocean in the Capitola Village, Facebook.com/Britannia Arms Capitola, 831-464-2583. The Make the Money and Run podcast will be back tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern, for the Friday football show. Vasivada Party, Charlie O with you. Intern Nick Robinson. We're attempting a guest tomorrow. I'm not going to say who it is to jinx it. If not, we'll have him on next week as well. We'll talk a lot of college football tomorrow and Saturday for Championship Friday and Saturday. A lot of BCS ramifications. Week 13 of the NFL for the full Friday football show. Thanks to everybody on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for checking in with us as well. Download, subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock on the West Coast, tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow morning for the Make the Money and Run Friday football show, sponsored by the Britannia Arms of Cupertino and Capitola. For Charlie O, I'm Vasivada Party. Have a great afternoon. Don't forget to check us out at 6 Eastern for our social media selections, and we will get to you then with all the latest news on our social media selections as well by 6 Eastern online. Take care, everybody. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern.